Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Drawing with Mr. Sepulveda. I'm Mr. Sepulveda, and today I'm going to go ahead and show you my process for what I do when I receive a new set of alcohol markers. Today's episode is going to feature these Arteza Everblend markers. This is their Fashion Tone set. This is not a sponsored video. I'm just a big fan of Arteza. My wife actually purchased that set for me. But I've also used Arteza's portrait set for like skin tones and things like that for a lot of my artwork. So I already know how I feel about this set, or feel about this brand rather. And so I'm going to walk you through my process for what I do, from like the color swatching to a planning phase, and then we're going to use them to color in a piece of artwork that I did. Okay, so let's go ahead and get to it. Alright, so you received your first set of alcohol markers. What do? Well, the first thing I do is I create a color swatch unless the art set already has one created for me. Color swatch is where you place down your colors that you have so that you can know exactly what they look like, because most caps on the outside of the markers don't match up with the output. They don't match up with what the color realistically looks like when you put it down on paper and let it dry. So creating a color swatch would be the first thing I would recommend. Just lay down the color, record the marker's code, and this way it'll save you a headache in the future when you're coloring in other art pieces. Okay, so I'm just going to let this time lapse until the end, and then I'll show you how this helps me out in my planning phase. So when the color swatching is over, it's time to begin thinking about what I want to draw. And ultimately, I really like the pinks that were in this Fashion Tone set. And the first thing that came to my mind was Amy Rose from Sonic X. She's pretty iconic to the series. She's got a pink fur. She has a cool red dress, big boots, and I thought a character that would eat up most of the paper would allow me to really utilize the markers to their fullest and kind of cover a wide range. So I'm hoping this character comes out the way that I want it to when we're done with the coloring phase. So I do my outlines digitally, as you may have seen in a few of my videos, and then I'm going to go into this traditionally with the markers. So after this time lapse, we'll get started. Alright guys, so now that my color swatch is done, I'm going to show you my process for kind of determining my colors, right? So over here is my planning sheet. With my planning sheet, I normally break down all the various sections of my character. So like shoes, rings, fur, skin, eyes, hammer, right? And I'll put it in a way that makes sense to me. Okay, so your planning might look a little bit different. And then next to them, I kind of pick out the colors from my color swatch that best match those areas. So in some areas, I'll only have one color, like this R39. So right over here, this is the color I'm going to use for the inside of Amy's ear. But then there's other areas that have like two numbers on them, right? So this is my R39 again. And it's also with my BR27. And so what I'm going to do here is kind of use that second color for like a little bit of shading. Okay, some areas have 3 levels of shading, right? While others only have like that, or 2 levels of shading and a base color, and some just have the 1 level of shading with the base color. Okay, so like the first number I use is my base. Okay, so I'm going to put this away. Okay. And this also helps me stay organized, and it's great to kind of refer back to because I did all the heavy lifting in the beginning. Okay. This is the piece that I finished lining. Okay, and I just use like regular micron pens and Photonosuke brush pens to do a majority of the line work on this piece. Okay, this is marker paper. So you need marker paper whenever you use alcohol paper. There's a bunch of different varieties. This one's a nice thick piece of paper, so there shouldn't be too much bleed through. However, some alcohol marker pads or marker papers are thin, and so I would recommend a piece of plastic or another sheet of paper underneath so that the markers don't bleed through onto the surface of your desk or table that you may be using. Okay, so with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started with our coloring phase. And so what I've decided to do is I'm going to start off coloring the hammer first on the outside and then kind of make my way inside. That's the plan for now, but sometimes I change my mind a little bit depending on how wet an area might be. So if it's here for a while, right, or sorry, let's say it's back here, I don't want to work on this area. I might want to work a little bit lower so that that area has some time to dry before I touch it with another marker. Okay, so we're going to start off with the hammer. I'm going to start off with the sides, and so I'm going to kind of talk through this and then we'll time lapse in certain parts as we go throughout. Okay, so right now I'm going to use my maize yellow. That's my Y17 from this Arteza set. Okay, so this is going to be my base tone. And so when I'm coloring this, I want to stick as close to that edge as possible, right? So that edge right there. And I'm actually going to do this where I'm using the chisel tip, and I want to follow that flow of the hammer as I go throughout this. Okay, so this is going to be my base. And one of the most unforgiving colors in an alcohol marker set is yellow. So my recommendation is to make sure that you let that line work have enough time to dry out, have enough time to breathe before you actually start applying a yellow tone to your paper, right? So I'm just gonna continue to follow this flow. Bam. Right, it's looking nice. You can see right there, but that's okay. It'll get covered up soon enough because you don't want to over wet that area. Okay, so that's the first layer, right? The first base tone to it, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to apply in some of the shadows, right? So I'm going to start over here. And again, I'm not going to use anything other than the markers that come in this set, right? So we're just going to kind of have some fun here with this. Okay, just kind of following that flow. And so when you lay them down, it might look a certain way, but they definitely do dry out differently. Okay, and then I might put a little bit over here. So what I might do over here is I might switch to the little bullet nib, right? So bullet's different than the chisel tip, and then of course different than a brush tip, right? So I'm just going to kind of get as close to this line as possible. Maybe bring it down a little bit. I'll normally use this for a little bit more finer areas or smaller areas, and then I can use the chisel for anything like a little bit wider, right? Just gonna kind of bring it down like that and bring it across, and I might even just go straight across here, and I might even go straight across down here as well. And a lot of things I do are more or less, not on the fly, but mostly based on like experience with using certain markers and how I feel like they'll look together. So it doesn't necessarily mean they'll like be 100% matching to the actual pictures that you use for reference. but I do like to kind of experiment a little bit. So like right here, I'm just kind of making sure I'm like packing in color, and that's part of like my art style. I'll love to pack in color into an area a lot. It's just a habit I have, I guess. I don't know. I know some artists let their art breathe a little bit more, right? Give some gaps, give some space. Yeah. So right now I'm just kind of showing a couple different ways to kind of apply in the ink. So here's just like going around in circles. Some people say that's the best way. Some people think going up and down or following across is the best way. Honestly, it all works the same. It's really artist preference and how you feel, like what you feel most comfortable with. All right, so we're going to be going into a little time lapse here. So with that right portion of the hammer, I'm using the bullet nib side of these Arteza markers because if I used the chisel tip, I felt like I would kind of cover some of Amy's hair, and I didn't want to do that, so I was trying to use a smaller nib for the smaller areas. With the staff, you're going to see that I'm going to use some vertical strokes, right, or directional strokes going up, and you'll see that I'm blending the two colors right there at a little midsection. So it's all about direction with a lot of these. For this mid part of the hammer, I'm going to use this tomato red color, which I absolutely loved. I felt like the way that it came out was really good. It had really strong value. It was really bright. It made everything pop really nicely, right? And you'll see that I'm following the direction of the hammer as if it were like a wheel, as if it were going upward. I'm using a crimson red color to kind of add in some shadows. I look at it, and then I decide I'm just going to color in those middle rectangles a little bit darker so that it kind of has that balance. I'm going back over it with the tomato red color, same direction as the hammers, just because I had a few white spots that I wasn't too keen with. Moving over here into the gloves, I'm using a neutral gray 7, and then I'm going over it with a neutral gray 5 to kind of give in some of those deeper values and deeper tones. Okay, so that I can kind of get those shadows. So I'm going to use that for the socks, I'm going to use that for the gloves, and a portion of the dress. I do apologize, I didn't realize that I was not under the camera when I was doing the shadows for Amy's socks. So I'm gonna move into the shoes. I'm still using that tomato red color. Really liked it. There you'll see that I'm going directionally with those. I'm just kind of following the shoe, and if I end up with any streaks in there, it kind of adds to it in the sense that, you know, some shoes have like a little bit of a shine to it. So I was really okay with it, and I didn't want to pack it in with too much color at all. Okay, I am adding in some depth by adding in some of the crimson red as a shadow layer in there. Her dress is about the same. Amy has a white stripe at the bottom of her dress. I didn't feel like putting a completely straight black line there, so you see that I omit it completely. I'm adding in some shadows around her, coloring in her headband. But I think overall these markers blended really nicely and really work well together. That's my overall impression with them, which I'm not too surprised because I've done the same things with their portrait tone set. Here I'm making the rings, or these gold bracelets for her. So I'm using a combination of different colors. So I'm mostly using their Y17, Y12. I'm using creme brulee right there, right? And then I'm going back over it with another like brown tone, and then re-solidifying it by going back over it with the original base color. Here I'm moving into her skin tones, and I thought this color would have been really nice by itself had I left it, but I really still wanted to add some depth, so I kind of went back in with that creme brulee color again, just because I'm so used to using that creme brulee tone with some skin tones for characters that I've done in the past, and I really like the way that they've turned out. I'm coloring in her fur which is pink. And then I try to do a couple of experimental things here. There's a pink lemonade or lemonade pink color. It's very vibrant, and it kind of pushed the color a little bit. It wasn't what I was looking for, but I definitely kind of fix it up later. So with my process, and you guys have seen that planning sheet, but sometimes you gotta go with some of your experiences, and so I use a lot of purples for some shadow colors, just to kind of push my subject forward. And so you'll see here I'm using that like pink lemonade color. It doesn't turn out to be what I want it to. It just seems very poppy for the most part. I don't know a better word to kind of use, but it just felt like it was just too pink on pink on pink. So here I'm going with like a dreamy purple, and then I go over it again with like a heather purple, and you can see that it definitely adds some contrast. And so I start using that for my shadow. So I'll go over what I did with the dreamy purple and then go back over it again with that heather purple, and you can see that it makes Amy pop a lot more, and it doesn't look as flat. So that's something to kind of consider as well. And I only knew to use the purples because that's what I've experimented with a lot. And so I think it added a little bit more depth to this character. It makes her stand out a little bit from like the hammer in the background and things like that. So after adding in the shadows, I kind of go back in with the original base color just to solidify up and clean up a few areas. Going to make sure that we hit up her eyes, the ring underneath the hammer, and then I'll also use a white jelly roll pen to make sure that I add in some highlights. One thing that I've learned that I've liked a lot was to make sure that I put in some shadows on the eyes, like on the sclera, white part of the eyes, just because it adds a little bit more depth as well. Here's the white jelly roll pen, and I'm going to talk to you right as soon as this time lapse is over. Alright guys, so now that the time lapse is over, you guys can see that I went ahead and added in a dark color to the bottoms of Amy's shoes. I used a neutral grade 3 for that. I also ended up using a grass green outline around the border of this character. Honestly, it would have been fine if I just left it the way it was, but I figured it needed a few more elements. So I went ahead and added in the iconic Sonic tiling, right, for the road and for the mountains in the background. But even still, that green on green kind of was clashing, so I went ahead and added in a blue background and changed the grass green outline to a darker blue. Overall, this Arteza 36 Everblend marker set, the Fashion Tone set that I used was incredible. I was able to use 25 of the 36 markers. It just had really high quality, a lot of seamless blends. I was really happy with the way that this picture turned out. There would be a few things that I would do differently in the future, but overall I liked it. If you guys like this video, please hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.